Welcome to Automotive EV. My name is Peter Wooding and thank you for joining us. Today I'm delighted to have with us here, even though we're hundreds of miles away, Colin Herron. And we're just going to generally talk about the current situation, the infrastructure, what's needed, and whether we feel we're going in the right direction. So welcome, Colin. Good to see you. So where would you like to start on this?
Where would I like to start? I would like to start on the mantra, we need more infrastructure. Because the reason I wanted to start on the we need more is because nobody can ever tell me what the more is. Again, at the Times at the weekend, it said, why buy an electric car that basically there's no infrastructure? But time and time, it has become much of a mantra in the press that we don't have enough infrastructure. And on LinkedIn and many channels, I always say, okay, we don't have enough. How much should we have? And people say, I don't know. Well, not just what should we have, buy 7 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt, rapid chargers, hubs, where in the country, and when in the country against volumes. And it's, oh, I don't know, but we definitely need more. And the Public Accounts Committee of the government have just said, we need more. But they don't say how much more. And they actually don't know if we've actually got enough now, because the way it's set out between the public and the private sector is, I'm absolutely confident nobody has a clue if anybody is using it. Nobody actually knows how much there is in the ground now. So that's where I would start with. There's total confusion in the marketplace on charging infrastructure.
Interestingly on that is, I don't think I've ever been, which I hate going to supermarkets, but I've ever been where there hasn't been available charging points. They've always got empty bays for electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I've got to declare that I've had a battery electric vehicle for almost 8 years now. And within the range of my house, we counted the other day, there are 8 supermarkets. Some of them are the really big ones. And that range is 2 miles, within 2 miles. Tesco's, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, the lot. And I cannot understand why anybody would think that I would leave my house, drive 2 miles, open the boot, take out a cable, plug it in, go to the shop for half an hour, come out, unplug the cable, put it in the boot, then put the shopping in, then drive home, especially if it's raining. I'm only going to use 2 miles there and 2 miles back. And if I lived in a rural area where I drove 30 minutes to a supermarket, possibly, but putting them in urban supermarkets always intrigues me, especially the slow chargers. The rapid chargers, I can see why you would turn up and put it on for 40 minutes, do your shop and leave. But filling supermarket car parks with 7 kilowatt chargers, I've never really understood.
7 kilowatt. What's that, what I will call in real terms, mileage or time that you get out of it in a typical 25-minute shop?
Oh, right. OK, so if you take 7 kilowatts, you will get about 24 miles in about 12 miles.
So you get 12 miles?
About that, yeah.
Of which you've used 4 to get there and back?
Yeah. So with my home charger, with my 30 kilowatt hour leaf, if I am absolutely flat empty, it's 10 hours to fill it.
Okay. Do you think that creates then people's misunderstanding of being able to use an EV?
I think the misunderstanding is there. I think it is propagated by the perception that it's like the 6 o'clock discussion, which has said, what happens when we all plug in at 6 o'clock? The same would happen if we all went to the petrol station at 6 o'clock. We'd have 3,000 cars per petrol station and the fuel grid would collapse. But we don't do that. And one of the things which we'll possibly discuss as well is consumer behaviour. We're in this interesting situation where all the research that's been done on drivers' behaviour and use of infrastructure will be about a year, 2 years old, because that's how long it takes to get published. The first leaf I got is obsolete. It's not even made now. The leaf I've got outside is obsolete. It's not even made now. So based on 500,000 people, a lot of them using cars that are no longer made anymore, we're trying to estimate and work out what the behavioural traits will be of 35 million cars. Now that is a challenge because the chargers are changing, the battery chemistry is changing, and people's understanding of the things is changing. So we're trying to predict what millions of people will do with the technology that they don't have yet, which is the same as this. Once people got this, it no longer became a telephone. They started to use it in strange ways. One thing was they used to plug it in all of the time. Well, you notice mine's not plugged in now.
Interesting, actually, when you look at the phone in general, which brings me on to something we discussed briefly before, wireless charging.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to go back to the supermarket a minute. Yeah. I personally, with an ICE vehicle, I hate filling it up. I sort of, you've touched on before, it's pouring it down with rain. Do you want to get a cable or not? Is the answer then that some of the bays at a supermarket, could they be more wireless, or economically, is that a total no-brainer for the supermarket to put in?
It's not a no-brainer, and most of it would be done by operators, because most of the chargers which you see in supermarkets are not run by the supermarkets. It's people borrowing a bit of land in a supermarket car park. The thoughts of driving up, parking the car, and the car automatically charges, that's a very nice idea. And in theory, it works. The challenge that we have is that the car makers have designed the cars to be charged through a plug, not from induction charging. So what we'd have to do is there would have to be an understanding and a bit of honesty from the main car makers that they were going to fit effectively a pad underneath as standard. If they don't fit them, then that's a problem. And at the moment, it's only available as an option on a 5 Series BMW. Nobody else is fitting them. So yes, the logic of just parking on the drive and the chargers is brilliant, so long as you park it exactly where you're supposed to park it. There's a lot of give and take in a long cable, but you have to position it very well. So you'd have to have sensors. It's not impossible. Technologically, it's great. Green lights, I'm over the pad, and you will charge. If you're going to get on to dynamic charging, I don't think that's got a hope. Okay. Frankly. The cost.
Not even, as we go a little bit more autonomous, and lots of things seems to be coming in my opinion, probably slightly too quickly on that. But or should an autonomous vehicle have that facility built in so that it makes it easier for inner city, if we call it that, inner city deliveries, inner city transportation modes in terms of the Uber type environment, valet parking, whatever. Is that a join together better?
I'm an engineer for all my life, and I work in a university, and we love putting together theoretical, logical happenings, and dynamic charging and fully autonomous vehicles makes absolute sense. Whether we'll ever get fully autonomous vehicles is another question. But one of the things you have to ask in a city centre is who is going to put this equipment in the road? who was going to dig up the roads to put it in? And as I've just witnessed in the estate I live in, the gas board have just been renewing the gas pipes. So who takes responsibility when all this very, very expensive equipment is put in the road and one of the utilities decides to dig up the road? Do they replace it? Who does that? So, and in a city centre, to put dynamic charging in many streets is really expensive. You've literally got to dig up the road, unless you lay it on the top of the road, which is another question if you can do that. But normally it's embedded in the road. Technically, it's possible. You know, engineering-wise, anything is possible. The challenge is who's going to pay to put it in and who's going to pay to look after it.
Okay. Looking on that then, how effectively can we really hit no ICE vehicles by 2035, which is including hybrid?
The honest answer to that goes down to the basic commodity, which is the battery. And in simple terms, there's one battery in one car. So what we've got to look at is the overall capacity of the battery plants to make batteries. So, you know, a gigawatt plant, so it's 1 in 9 noughts. If the batteries have got an average size of 50 kilowatt hours, it's 50 in 3 noughts. So you divide the two, one into the other, and you say, that's how many cars we can have. So when you add up the capacity of all the battery plants going into Europe and around the world and divide it by the average battery size, that's the number of vehicles we will get. Now, we sell about 1.9 million a year in this country. So we need, for our share of the European market, 1.9 million. And there's lots of people who look at the battery capacity going in and what we should get. And I think we're at about, for 2030, we're at about half the capacity we need. In this country, we have only currently got 50,000 capacity.
Okay.
That's it. Now, I know there's the announcement of British Volt are going to build a battery very close to me, and they will produce about 300,000 batteries, but we make about 2 million vehicles. And the other challenge we've got is it's not the British car industry, unfortunately. It's somebody else's car industry, and we make their cars. So they actually decide what's being made. So we put the legislation down, and it's up to them to decide what they're going to make. And at the moment, if you look across the whole of the UK, there's the Leaf comes out the Sunderland plant, there's the Mini comes out the Cowley plant, and that's it. That as far as I know. So unless Vauxhall, Toyota and JLR rapidly turn and have the intent of producing these vehicles, we will struggle. And if we don't have the battery plants around Europe to do it, we're going to rely on imports. But I was presenting last week to India. India's got massive ambitions to electrify. And the number of vehicles of batteries they need for India is colossal. The number of battery plants needed for North America is colossal. So this transition is going on, but I don't think it's an engineering-led transition. I think it's a political-led transition. And in some technologies, we still don't have an answer for the long-distance HGV. If an HGV left the Sunderland plant and drove to Milan without a diesel engine, currently, I don't know how it would do that.
So realistically, when we're looking at it, we've got to be taking more and more of everything like that into consideration, because it's okay saying we're going to be zero on the cars, but we've also got to be zero throughout the chain in logical terms.
We haven't broached that. If I was a betting man, I would think you'll be hearing us going for net zero as opposed to zero. Because there isn't an answer for aircraft yet. We should electrify all the trains, but it's deemed as too expensive. Will we have battery? But looking at the supply chain, everything from mining through to disposal, the life cycle analysis is critical for the whole thing, which goes into the infrastructure. Where do you get your electricity from for the infrastructure? So you've also got the challenge where I said to somebody recently, you could have a very small car made in a country with a coal-fired power station, which is making the steel and making the batteries, and it's not as green as a Tesla made in France.
Yeah. Do you want to take any questions as they come in?
Anything at all.
We've got one now into the in the sort of chat area, but we've got a question in from Colin Herron. Do you think battery prices will come down? And do you also think the weight of the batteries will reduce?
The answer is they will come down in price, but we've had the reverse hockey stick of them coming down. So they've come down from a really high level, even up to $1,000 per kilowatt hour, and it's come right down now. And we're now getting narrow bits out with the current chemistry. So they will come down, and now we've got battery scale that should bring it down as well. The weight is another challenge. I can't see a dramatic reduction in weight until we move to potentially solid state or something of that nature. Because one of the things we're doing is, with the current chemistry, the bigger the battery, all we're doing is squeezing more of what we had in a smaller battery into it. Consequently, they get bigger, but they get heavier as well. So the weight is a problem. I don't see anything, unless the casing of the battery becomes something like fiberglass, but you got all the crash problems with that. So yes, the prices will come down, but not by the margins that they've done over the last 5 to 10 years. But there will be a volume impact will come into it.
You touched on solid state, yeah, which obviously Volkswagen are pushing heavily.
Yeah.
Is that not the future of batteries, given that the range is bigger and they're smaller, and they're less of a fire risk as well?
Everything you said, and the good thing is those who are investing in high power chargers at the moment will be able to use them properly. So when the current discussion is, I see this, we put in a 350 kilowatt charger, you can charge your car in 5 minutes. Utter rubbish. My car will charge at the same rate, even if it's on a megawatt charger. It can't cope with it. The technology in the vehicles has not yet caught up with the technology of the chargers. But there's some really good, especially some of the Korean cars are coming up with some fantastic charging profiles. And it's really interesting to watch how getting that sweet spot of sort of 200-mile range in 20 minutes 30 minutes is coming about. But that's where we are at the moment.
How long do you think that could take?
I spoke to a chief scientist on batteries, and he said to me, and I can't disagree with him, they will go in these initially to see if they work. They will then go into the laptop, which I'm talking to you on, to see if they work in laptops and they're safe. Then they will go into cars. From what I'm hearing, we are talking 2028 for volume production. And bear with me on this, I don't think we're going to be in the world of NCM batteries, nickel, cobalt, manganese per se. I think we're going to have different lithium chemistry batteries for different markets. And I've also heard when the solid state comes out, it'll come out as a premium product.
Okay.
So the urban mine will still be what I call wet lithium ion. The Porsche will probably have a solid state, and it'll be sold as a premium product because people will pay for it.
That becomes more of a challenge, though, when you think of the UK as a whole, where sort of we're being steered towards EV, which I think's right, but there's a big income differentiator on this, and everything we're talking about with high-speed charging, we're relating to Tesla because it does this, and we can add the costs. Everything then becomes a premium within solid state. So we're talking at the top end Volkswagens. Surely we've got to be looking more at this to suit the Leaf and all the other affordable vehicles, so that everybody can actually be driving an EV and not be charging for 10 hours when someone else can charge for.
Yes, but there's another equation here, that if you look at something like the Zoe, fantastic, but that's now crept up to a 50 kilowatt hour battery. One of the things me, you, and the people who are listening to this have to understand and come to terms with. If you're driving a 4-litre Audi and you swap a 4-litre Audi for a Porsche Taycan, that's not becoming sustainable. That's just continuing your lifestyle and hoping technology will solve the problem that the planet has.
Yeah.
We still have, and it is often said and it's highlighted, we have poor people in places like the Congo digging this stuff out. If we want to have an impact, we should have, I would suggest, 2 of my cars or 3 of my cars for every big powered Tesla, high capacity Tesla. I've just got to charge it more often. But at the moment, I'm charging my 30 kilowatt hour Leaf once a week. So what we are doing is we're repeating the feelings of the past and asking the infrastructure and technology to substitute. So instead of me burning as much oil as I want in my car, diesel or petrol, because I have the ego and I can afford it, we're now producing cars which will go from 0 to 60 in 1.1 seconds. Why? Why? You know, these are questions which we as a society have to ask. So very soon, you'll get your solid state battery, you'll get your 500-mile range, you'll get your charge in 10 minutes, but have you actually changed anything apart from there's no tailpipe emissions? The mindset is the same. I think it would be better if urban around here and around where you live, I've got a 30 kilowatt hour battery and I can charge it quickly or sensibly. But this is the debate that the government's not having with people. It's a hope that the technology, the charging infrastructure and the car will solve the problem, and it won't.
So what would you look at doing?
One of the 2 things I would do straight away is I would try to get a grip of what's happening with infrastructure, because the public sector's putting infrastructure in, the private sector's putting infrastructure in, the private sector's in competition with the other private sector, the public sector's in competition with the public sector. The government has a grant system which encourages all the local authorities to fill their car parks with charge points, which is not necessarily where the drivers want, but it's the easiest thing to do. We have things like ZapMap, which is brilliant, and it'll tell you once the charge has gone in where it is, but there's thousands in workplaces that nobody knows about, except the people at the workplace, because they're not publicly accessible. When we do a picture of how many chargers we've got versus the number of vehicles we've got, we don't know what we have. So we've got to start modelling for local authorities and cities for a given geospatial wealth, whatever of the city. We have to do some serious modelling of how much infrastructure is required, then try and engage the private sector and find out what they're doing. And also the car makers, which is the hardest one because I work for one, have got to start coming clean on what technology they're going to release and when. Because without the infrastructure, it's pointless them making millions of cars if they can't be charged and people don't want to buy them. So we have a disconnect between the private sector trying to grab as many bits of land to put chargers in as possible, the public sector being hammered by the press that they're not putting enough in, but they tend to put them in the wrong places, and the car makers not really telling anybody what they're doing. Which is fascinating for somebody like me.
It's fascinating across the board, but then I'm just going to keep bringing into what would naturally sort of flow in. So are we then, is it more logical rather to have sort of street furniture, in other words, lampposts or whatever, or spots being more strategically around where people live, if in that particular area people do not have access to off-road parking?
I'm going to be absolutely flippant. Do those people have a petrol pump outside their house now?
Very, very true, actually, very true.
So what's the problem of going to a filling station full of high power chargers? I don't understand the argument.
You're back to the fact that unless your vehicle has the capability of utilizing a high-speed charger, you are talking about the person who hasn't access to their drive and they've got a sort of a more cost-effective vehicle, if you want to call it that, for them. You're not going to go for 10 hours, are you?
Well, it's not 10 hours. Look, next to me is a Morrison's. It's 1 minute drive. In my old 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, it'll take me 40 minutes to fill it.
Okay.
Once a week.
Which will give you how?
100 miles of range.
Okay, so it should be more than enough for generally using it once a week. Probably.
It should be.
Yeah.
About 25 trips to the supermarket.
So we're then looking back to the rare occasions, for example, where people do need a car to go a greater distance and have to plan it better.
At the moment, I would not. This is one of the things, forget about COVID. People say to me, what if you have to go to London? And I say, it's 2 hours 50 on the train. It's 5 hours by car. Why would I drive to London to get to King's Cross to government or somewhere? It's nuts. There's a train every 30 minutes, takes 2 hours 50. I just get on the train. If I have to go to Cornwall, at the moment, I will go and hire a diesel.
Okay.
What's wrong with that? My carbon footprint completely offsets that diesel over the year for one journey to Cornwall and back. It's being sensible.
Okay. That makes sense. Even more so if you could have had a Tesla to do it, so you're remaining totally carbon neutral.
Well, to be honest, I was lucky. I visited the British Vault site last week and Quinton Wilson was there. And he'd just driven 250 miles from the Midlands non-stop in his Tesla.
Okay. So should we have this utilization then of, well, I'm going to throw this totally about face. If you were, as part of your electric consumption, able to lease or whatever a vehicle from your energy provider, who you would then be able to say, well, I'm going to such and such, can I pull from the pool the Tesla Model 3 or the Audi e-tron or whatever, because I need it for those 3 or 4 days and have a top-up rental? Could that work?
When Nissan first brought the Leaf out, they had, many, many years ago, a deal with the dealership, and I did it once, where you took the Leaf back for a week and just borrowed a diesel.
Okay.
Now,
so we need that greater flexibility, really, because that solves the problem for anybody with range anxiety. You just flip the vehicle.
The problem we've got at the moment is the press and everybody think in binary terms. Life's not like that. In London, 2 million journeys a day are less than 2 kilometres. 2 kilometres. In this region, we did some validated research of people's journeys. And everybody we asked how many miles they did a day got it wrong by 100%.
Wow.
Got it wrong by 100%. How far do you drive in a day? And we go through that. The total for the UK is 26 miles a day, averaged over everybody, right? My wife is 3,000 a year.
Yep.
A year, right? She has no problem with the electric vehicle at all. I have no problem. Having said that, if I wanted to drive to the Isle of Skye in my 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, I'd be madness at the moment. I could do it, but it would take me a long, long time. But what we got to stop thinking of is in this binary term. I understand, and I do work with the rural economy. What does a farmer do with a 4x4 that tows sheep around all day? At the moment, there's no answer. There's absolutely no answer. In rural Northumberland, there are, I believe, 200 houses that simply don't have electricity yet. They rely on their remoteness on diesel generators. How do we deal with that? And not only this was primarily around infrastructure. We've got the challenge that we don't know what type of double-decker bus we'll use. We don't know what long-distance coaches will be. We don't know what HGVs will be. And there's a difference between what I call a captive HGV in a region and a long-haul HGV. Will some be electric, some be hydrogen? Those questions are open. But more and more, we have to look at ourselves and say, do I need to make that journey by that mode of travel? So when I go to Newcastle, I use the metro. It's in the morning, it's twice the speed, and it gets me in the city centre quite easily. So I use that a lot. And if I'm going somewhere awkward, my wife's got an old Micra, we take the Micra.
Okay.
Until the system builds up. But bear in mind, we have 500,000 vehicles with a plug. We have 20 million homes with off-street parking. It's not a problem. It's a problem for the person who lives in an area without much charging infrastructure, who lives on a 4th floor flat. And that is the one the press will interview.
Yeah.
And my question, I'll be honest, is why did you buy one? Why would you buy one that you can't charge? It seems quite odd. But if that person is an eco-warrior or whatever, or they just say, I want to buy one, then you're going to have to find the rapid charger or where it is. But in most cities, I mean, look at the GridServe one in Braintree. That's a huge thing they built. Yeah. Ecotricity at Rugby Services, I think they've just put 12 high power chargers. These things are opening all over the country. The only problem is because unless they have to go for planning permission and the sum of all these are added up, it's very hard to paint a picture and understand what is actually going on. And what we don't know is, and one of the big factors is how much power the average person takes. So let me just say one of the things that me and you would do on a motorway. If I'm about 50 miles from home and I need petrol, I will put £5 worth in at the motorway and you'll fill it up when you get back to your local supermarket. Yes?
Yes, actually.
Exactly. Will people start using the rapid chargers the same way? They'll put in a little bit till they get home, then they can put it on a slow charger. All this behavioural habit has got to be worked out. Now, if we go forward, when I used to go to work, I could charge for nothing.
Yep.
So I had free motoring. What as we go forward with the big infrastructure picture, I can charge at work, then I come home and I run the house off the car. So somebody said to me recently, what happens if 20 million people plug in at 6 o'clock? Say, what happens if 20 million houses come off the grid at 6 o'clock? Wow, that would have a big impact on the grid, wouldn't it? In February, because there's no reason why not. So I think we're going to get to the point where you'll have an all-electric house, and as part of your one utility bill, it'll include a car, it'll include how you pay for your electricity when you're roving around, and you will get a utility bill, which will cover the car, probably the price of the car, and you will pick your electricity package that you want based on the miles that you do, the type of vehicle you want, and it'll come with the house. This is the different thinking, which is exciting.
Yeah. One part I feel the necessity to bring up, from a government perspective, who are driving 2030 and 2035, how are they going to catch back the revenue that they generate from a petrol or diesel vehicle? Given 57 pence a litre, is it, that there is taxation, plus the VAT on the whole bill on top? How are they going to help put all these systems in if there is no charging mechanism in terms of revenue generating, which they've always had?
My opinion, it'll be road pricing. You'll simply pay it by mile, a price, whether it's 10p or whatever. So if it was £1 a mile, it would cost me £250 to drive to London. Obviously, that's prohibitive. That's not going to happen. But what they can do with road pricing, which they can't do with fuel duty, is they can regulate the use of the roads like they regulate the use of the trains.
Okay.
So the M25, you could up the price of using that road like you can with electricity peak time, off peak. You can up the price to keep people off the road. So it gives them more scope, and it will be equitable as far as I can see. If I decide to do as my wife does 3,000 miles a year, she pays for 3,000. If I do 8,000, I pay for 8,000. I personally can't see an alternative.
So you would regulate that within the vehicle then?
Yes. Well, we currently got EMPR cameras that know everywhere we are. My phone every month tells me where I've been. So the vehicle itself would have a monitoring system, and we just picked up, and it would record how many miles it's done, like I do with my sports watch when I'm running, or my phone when I'm out walking. It tells me how many miles I've done, where I've been, and that's the bill. Thank you.
It's an interesting concept because it seems on sort of face value, if you want to call it that, to be fair for everybody. It'd be interesting if anybody's got any comments on that online to bring it in. But to me, that does make a logical step. You're paying for your usage. Like your insurance actually is the same way, isn't it? Your insurance relates to how often you use the car, really.
But to be honest, if it was recorded that accurately, your insurance bill should be more accurate. Instead of me saying, I think I do 8,000 miles, I think I do 10,000. Then they could actually, you could have insurance cost per mile or whatever more accurate. It's like the black box. I mean, when my daughter passed her test, she got the insurance black box in to change the way that she drives. Yeah. And it recorded things in much more detail.
So we can utilise external technology a lot more to actually drive forward some of the things that we're wanting to achieve, you think?
Yep. Of course we can. I mean, to be honest, with the electric vehicle, if we wanted to, we can regulate its speed as well. We can stop speeding on motorways instantly if we want to, just by regulating, ring fencing the vehicle. So there's a lot that I think, instead of focusing, and we're not wasting time, but spending time on the dream of the driverless car, I think what we should be doing is using technology to solve the problems that we've got in the next 5 to 10 years to make EV work better.
Okay, I want to touch back on, you were mentioning regulating the power to the vehicle. How would that work?
regulating the.
Well, you'd mentioned about sort of you would be able to sort of, is it force how fast people are going at different times to spread out? How would it do that though?
Oh, well, if we got levels of automation, which we have now, which is keeping the distance, right, okay, I'll put it this way. Yeah. There was a situation on the Western Bypass where they put in a regulatory speed limit. The traffic has never flowed as well as it did with the 50-mile-an-hour average speed cameras.
Yeah.
It just didn't, as soon as they took them off, it was brake, bunch, accelerate, brake, bunch. And what they found was if they could regulate the vehicles and the distance and the speed, everybody gets a better journey, there's less pollution, there's less all sorts of things. Now, there's no reason why they can't, with the level of automation or control, ring fence the speed that vehicles are actually doing on motorways or in urban areas.
Very good point. Covering we've actually only got about 4 minutes left, which is
we've covered a bit.
What should the government do then? Let's, in order to achieve the levels that we're achieving and assist industry and individuals, what can they do?
I tell you what they should do. They should treat this the same as they did the vaccine. We need to roll this out to 35 million cars, 500,000 vans, 150,000 trucks, and have the infrastructure to make it work. There should be an EV transition task force, the same as there's a vaccine task force, where people who are engineers and modelers all get together and go through how much infrastructure do we need? We have to work out, do we have 2 doses? What speed does it have to work at? What's the behavioural changes? So instead of, we have to keep a distance and wear a mask, how long will people charge? Where will they charge? How many will charge at home? How many will charge here? What's the rate we're going to get the vehicles in, like the vaccines? Have we got enough coming? What if we can't solve the problem for HGVs? Do we use synthetic fuels? Do we say, we've got to run HGVs for further? What is the answer for buses? Do we let one city have hydrogen, one city have battery buses? How does it work? And I think we've reached the point where if we want to hit 2030 and 2035, we have to have centres of mobility where we start also to measure cause and effect. Is this working? Is it actually working? Are we reducing the particulates? Are we having a CO2 impact? What will be the true impact year by year? Just changing policies by 5 years, etc. I mean, when I worked at Nissan, one of the best things about my Japanese teachers, they used to beat me over the head. What data have you got? They used to call it the Gemba. Have you been to see the problem? Do you understand the problem? Do you understand what to do to solve the problem? And I don't think we do. I think we're just relying on the public and the private sector and people to solve the problem without data to back it up. Hence where we were when we started this, we need more infrastructure. Yeah. Okay, somebody tell me what more is. And that's what I do. That's my life in Newcastle University at the moment. We're trying to calculate and work out what is more.
Yeah, who's defining the what is more?
Yeah. What is more? And not just more, by type and location and when. Because we can put 1 million charge posts in this year, but they'll never get used.
Yeah, which is a pointless waste of time and
money. Exactly.
Yeah, we've got to put a more practical use to the expenditure level.
Yes, and if you put them in now, in 3 years' time, they'll be out of warranty, and people will be complaining that they're broken, etc., which is what happened when we put all the stuff in 10 years ago, when we didn't have hardly any electric vehicles. Most of it didn't get used. It all fell into disrepair, and people complained that the stuff doesn't work. Correct. It's reality.
Any thought you would give for anybody? What should be someone's takeaway from this?
What somebody's takeaway would be to understand what we're really trying to achieve, and it's like most things that you hear when people talk about something. Read what the words are and start to think, what are the variables in all of this? Is it as straightforward as just putting chargers on the street in lampposts? And bear in mind, in my street, I can see them. The lampposts are not at the curb, they're at the other side. So the cable has to go across the pavement as well. And more less lampposts are going in because they use LEDs, and LEDs only want 200 watts, not 3 kilowatts. So they don't have the power. We've got to start not just reacting to what the press says. We've got to start educating the press and politicians to what is feasible, what can be done.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I think, well, we're actually over time, but as usual, really appreciated that. Thanks very much.
I hope it was worthwhile. It's
definitely worthwhile. And I think with everything, we've got to remain open-minded about everything that we're doing. And just because you talked about the cabling, just because we've always filled up the car with a pipe and a thing, we don't necessarily have to do moving forward or in a different format. But thanks very much, Colin. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we will see you in person this year.
Just to meet people again in person will be fabulous.
Yeah. Well, we're planning actually for November. So we definitely would like you back at the Slate again, middle of November. And hopefully they might be able to be in that space more than the two of us, but if not, we'll do it anyway. Thanks, Colin.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Hi, it's Peter again, and thank you for watching the session. Don't forget you can connect with all members within the EV community. Send messages to each other and start to build relationships for the future. Also, take a look at our supplier showrooms. Our partners have got lots of products and services that they have to offer, which again could be of benefit to you. Make the most of the opportunity, and thank you again for joining us.